This is a story about something I encountered in my biology class. It should not be on this planet. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was supposed to be a simple research project, something to pad my resume before graduation. But now, as I sit here in this sterile laboratory, fluorescent lights flickering above me, I realize I've unleashed something I cannot control. And it knows. I guess I should start from the beginning. My name is Mark Keaton, and I'm a senior biology major at Crestwood University. I'm not a standout student, not one of those prodigies who gets published in Nature while still in undergrad. I'm the guy who scrapes by with a 3.2 GPA, more interested in weekend beer pong tournaments than lab hours. But I wanted to change that. Grad schools aren't impressed by mediocrity. So, when Dr. Amelia Quinn, my molecular biology professor, announced an opportunity to assist her with a side project, I jumped at the chance. Dr. Quinn wasn't just a professor. She was a rock star in the field. If I could get a recommendation from her, it would be my golden ticket. The project seemed mundane at first. We were cataloging microorganisms in the soil around Crestwood's expansive forest reserve. The area was a hotspot for biodiversity, and Dr. Quinn was interested in finding previously undocumented microbes. Nothing glamorous, just collecting samples, isolating bacteria, running tests. It was during one of these fieldwork sessions that I found it. The forest was quiet that day, eerily so. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves in the breeze, just the crunch of my boots on the damp earth. I was supposed to collect samples from a stream bed a mile into the woods, an area untouched by human interference. The stream was barely a trickle, winding its way through moss-covered rocks and gnarled roots. I knelt by the water's edge, scooping soil into a sterile container. That's when I noticed something unusual. At first, I thought it was just a strange rock, half buried in the mud. But as I brushed away the dirt, I realized it wasn't a rock at all. It was smooth, almost glass-like, and faintly translucent. It pulsed. Not like a heartbeat exactly, but there was a rhythm to it, a faint throbbing that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I was desperate to impress Dr. Quinn. Using a pair of tweezers, I carefully pried it from the soil. It was surprisingly light, no larger than a golf ball, and warm to the touch through my gloves. As I held it up to the light, I saw something moving inside. A swirling dark mass, like ink in water. I sealed it in a sample jar, labeled it, and stuffed it into my backpack. Back at the lab, I decided to keep it to myself for the time being. I told myself I wanted to run preliminary tests before presenting it to Dr. Quinn, but deep down, I think I was afraid she'd take it away from me. The first thing I did was examine it under a dissecting microscope. Up close, the surface was even stranger. Intricate, fractal-like patterns that seemed to shift when I looked away, as if the object didn't want to be observed too closely. The dark mass inside wasn't ink, it was alive. It moved with purpose, coiling and uncoiling like a snake trapped in glass. I decided to run a DNA analysis. The process was routine. Extract a small sample, amplify the genetic material using PCR, and compare the sequence to known organisms. But the results were anything but routine. It didn't match anything. Not bacteria, not fungi, not even archaea. Its genetic structure wasn't just unknown, it was impossible. The sequences didn't follow the rules of earthly biology. No ATCG bases, no codons, no proteins as we understood them. I should have stopped there. I should have gone to Dr. Quinn or hell, even the government. But instead, I kept digging. I fed it. At first, I wasn't sure what it ate. I placed it in a petri dish with various nutrient mediums. Glucose, amino acids, lipids, but it didn't react to any of them. Then, as a last resort, I pricked my finger with a sterile needle and let a single drop of blood fall onto the dish. The response was immediate. The dark mass inside the object surged toward the edge of its container, pressing against the glass as if it could sense me. I watched, horrified and fascinated, as the blood was absorbed through the surface. It grew. Not much, just a few millimeters, but enough to notice. The patterns on its surface became more intricate, almost hypnotic, and the pulsing grew stronger. I started having nightmares. They weren't like normal dreams. They felt invasive, as if something was burrowing into my mind. I saw flashes of alien landscapes, towering black spires under a blood-red sky, oceans of writhing serpentine creatures. And always, at the center of it all, was the object, pulsating like a malignant heart. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My days became a blur of lab work and frantic notes. The object consumed me in more ways than one. Things escalated 2 weeks later. I came into the lab one morning to find the containment jar shattered. The object was gone. Panic set in immediately. I tore the lab apart, searching every corner, but it was nowhere to be found. That's when I noticed the trail. A thin, glistening residue led from the shattered jar to the air vent near the floor. It had escaped. I should have evacuated the building, called security, anything, but I didn't. I told myself I could handle it, that it was my responsibility. I followed the trail. The residue led out of the lab, down the hallway, and into the basement, a part of the building that was rarely used. The air grew colder as I descended, the fluorescent lights above me flickering ominously. The trail ended at a storage room. The door was ajar, creaking slightly as I pushed it open. The room was dark, the only light coming from a flickering bulb overhead. And there, in the center of the room, was the object, or at least what it had become. It was no longer small and contained. It had grown, now the size of a basketball, its surface pulsating violently. Tendrils extended from it, writhing like the limbs of some grotesque sea creature. The dark mass inside had expanded, taking on a more defined shape. Something vaguely humanoid, but wrong. It turned toward me. I don't know how else to describe it. It didn't have eyes, but I felt its gaze, cold and calculating. And then it spoke, not in words, but in my mind. A voice that wasn't a voice. A torrent of alien thoughts that threatened to overwhelm me. "You brought me here." I stumbled back, my head pounding. It took a step forward. Or maybe it was a lunge. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, and fluid at the same time. "You will sustain me." That was when I ran. I don't remember much after that. I think I blacked out at some point, collapsing in a stairwell. When I came to, the building was in chaos. Sirens blared and the air was thick with smoke. Campus security found me and dragged me outside. They told me there had been a chemical spill, that the lab was being evacuated as a precaution. But I knew the truth. It wasn't a chemical spill, it was loose. That was 3 days ago. I've been holed up in my apartment ever since, trying to drown out the whispers and the growing hunger clawing at my insides. The object, no, the thing, isn't just in my head, it's inside me. The patterns spreading across my skin have deepened, like glowing scars etched into my flesh. They move when I don't look, shifting subtly, forming symbols I can't decipher. I've tried everything. Soap, bleach, even slicing into the patterns with a kitchen knife. But they don't bleed, and they don't stop growing. I thought isolation would help, that if I kept to myself, I could contain whatever's happening. But the whispers grow louder the longer I'm alone. They don't just speak anymore. They show me things. Alien landscapes flash behind my closed eyes when I try to sleep. A red sky churns with storms of black lightning. Towering spires pierce the horizon. Their surface is alive with slithering patterns. At the center of it all is the object, or something larger, more horrific, pulsing like a malignant heart. "Bring me the others," the whispers demand. I've stopped sleeping. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the weight of its gaze. I don't know if it's paranoia or something worse, but I swear I hear something crawling inside the walls, moving in the shadows. I'm afraid to leave, but I'm even more afraid to stay. On the 4th day, I ventured out, desperate for answers. Crestwood University's library was mostly empty, and I hoped it would offer some clarity. Maybe some obscure journal or textbook could explain what I'd unleashed. As I searched the stacks, the whispers grew agitated. They directed my attention to a student sitting a few tables away, headphones in, oblivious. "Her!" the voice hissed. I gritted my teeth and ignored it, flipping through an old biology text. But the hunger clawed at me, a deep, primal urge that wasn't mine. The patterns on my skin flared under my hoodie, searing with heat. "Bring her to me!" I slammed the book shut and fled, the whispers howling in rage. That night, the hunger became unbearable. My reflection in the bathroom mirror wasn't mine anymore. My pupils were elongated, my teeth sharper, my skin glowing faintly in the dark. The whispers taunted me. "You cannot fight this. You are the vessel." I don't know how long I stared into the mirror before I noticed the movement behind me. A shadow, darker than the room itself, slithered along the ceiling. It coalesced into a shape, a humanoid figure, its limbs impossibly long, its surface writhing with the same fractal patterns as my skin. "You will obey!" It surged toward me, and I screamed, shattering the mirror with my fists. But when I turned, the shadow was gone. On the 5th day, I decided to leave Crestwood. My apartment felt like a tomb, and the forest was calling to me. I didn't want to go back, but something deeper than thought urged me toward the stream bed. It wasn't the whispers this time. It was the thing inside me, pulling me like a marionette on invisible strings. The forest was unrecognizable. The trees seemed taller, their branches intertwining to blot out the sky. The air was heavy, oppressive, and the ground squirmed beneath my feet as if alive. When I reached the stream bed, I found it, or rather, what it had become. The object was no longer small or contained. It had grown into a massive, pulsating mass of tendrils and shifting patterns. At its center was the dark core, no longer vague or formless. It was humanoid now, its outline grotesque and alien. "You have returned," it said, though its voice wasn't audible. It resonated in my bones, a low, grinding hum that made my teeth ache. I didn't mean to. "You fed me. You brought me here. Now, you will finish what you started." Before I could run, its tendrils lashed out, wrapping around my arms and legs. They burned like fire, fusing to my skin, pulling me closer. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the thing's pulsating mass. When I woke, I wasn't in the forest. The sky above me churned with blood-red clouds, streaked with black lightning. The ground beneath me pulsed with movement, covered in the same writhing patterns, now etched into my flesh. I wasn't alone. The spires I'd seen in my visions loomed in the distance, and between them slithered countless creatures. Some were massive, their forms impossible to describe. Others were smaller, humanoid but warped, their bodies a grotesque fusion of flesh and fractal. They turned to look at me, their eyes, or whatever they used to see, gleaming with recognition. "Welcome home," they said in unison. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The ground itself rose to meet me, wrapping around my legs, pulling me down. The patterns on my skin flared, and I realized with horror that they were connecting me to this place. I was becoming one of them.